Let's talk about male and female ratios in San Francisco and why, if you are a single guy, dating here is a lot tougher for you. At the end of the video, I'll also give you some tips as to what to do. I myself am someone who's lived in the Bay Area at one point for up to 7 years when I was working at a big tech company. So I know exactly what that feels like. To begin this video, I want to take you back to the singles map. You guys might be familiar with this map. This is actually a pretty popular map 10 years ago. And I think it was by a professor, and he basically took the US Census data and mapped out the single to male ratios across the country. If we go by this map, as a single guy, if you want to increase your chances of supply and demand in terms of the dating market, you look at this map and you're like, well, here are some places in Texas, here are some places in the Midwest. It sounds like Miami and New York and New Jersey are the best places to be, right? So this was like 10 years ago. It's kind of become a meme, this map, and most people still remember this. There's this guy, Jonathan Soma, who's a writer based out of Brooklyn, and he did something interesting. He said, look, this is the old data, but let's look at the facts, relook at the facts. And what he did was he used a visualization software and he built out basically what we realize now, which is if you look at just the singles in terms of the census data from 20 to 29 females, from 20 to 29, you actually see that overall in the US, there are more men than women. So just a question of whether or not there are less men compared to other cities. You can see here in LA, there's 16 extra single men per 1,000 singles. And in New York, that number goes down to 7 extra single men per 1,000 singles. Some rare exceptions here in these states. If you go up to 20 to 34, which is the age where most women get married, you see here it's mostly men as well. And when you look at the data, he said basically 50 plus, there are a lot more single women than men. And so that data basically averages out. It looks like overall there's more women than men. Now what's interesting is he actually did the visualization across the Bay Area, and you can see here the major difference. In the Bay Area, if you're in the South Bay, right, you're basically looking at 20% more men than women. Very, very rare exception here in the North Bay. And in particular, when you zoom into the actual city itself, in the marina in particular, there appears to be more women, single women, than men. Okay, but everywhere else in the city, including the South Bay, particularly bad for men. San Francisco here, you can see, besides the Marina District, everywhere else, pretty bad ratios. You can see here, overall, if you're in the South Bay, let's just say the ratio is not in your favor. Now, obviously, if you're in the 50 plus crowd, there are a lot more single women 50 plus. And if you're in the Bay Area, that seems to be the case as well, except here in San Francisco. When we contrast that to New York, you'll see here in Manhattan, New York, especially like Midtown, there are a lot more single women, like almost 40% more women than men. As you go out of Manhattan, you can see here there are more blue spots, right? But as you even go out, there's actually a lot more pink areas than you think. And so overall on the East Coast, it's just a lot better ratios for dating. Well, why is this important to you? Let's take a look at the comments, right? So when it comes to singles ratios, even a small percentage change is a big deal because you're looking at a couple of million people living in these type of metropolitan cities. And when you have a couple of even 1-2% shift, that's a massive amount of people. The dating dynamic changes where there's a lot more power, supply and demand for the gender that has a lower ratio compared to their opposite gender. Let's take a look at the comments. LOL, couldn't agree more. As a single San Francisco man, I'm so frustrated with all the gorgeous models here. If only the masses of supermodels could take their stunning looks and bodies elsewhere, then we could have our homely bookworms back. As a youngish guy who moved from the Bay Area from New York City, I don't think I've seen as many really good-looking guys in the city. Great place for single ladies, but lousy place for single guys unless you're gay. Except for a few parts of the city, women don't really seem to care much about their looks, and the ones that do get a lot of male attention. Unless I make my first million in the next 6 months, I'm getting out of here ASAP. NYC was more affordable. Interesting. Yeah, San Jose, Campbell, Milpitas, I've been to all those places. I used to live in Sunnyvale. San Francisco is better, that is true. The nightclubs are terrible. They're not bad, but he's saying reasonably dressed looking men and women. The ratio is 10 guys to 100, 10 girls to 100 guys. I don't know if this is true. He's exaggerating. Dance lessons are about 8 girls to 10 guys. I would say that's correct for salsa class. Safeway markets 40 to 60. I have seen the most desperate guys in the Bay Area that I've ever seen in my life, and I've lived in a few countries. Yeah, I would agree with that. I have seen some pretty desperate behavior patterns in the Bay. And I think when you live over a period of time, you start adjusting to the environment and you start forgetting there are other places. I remember when I was here for like 2 or 3 years straight, even I had that feeling of desperation, like the supply is limited, and it just felt different. You could see your behavior modifying according to your environment if you stay there and don't go out for too long. Like climate change, many have long denied our city's inconvenient truth. Unequivocally, the San Francisco dating pool is tilted in women's favor. Yes, we know that from just the data alone. Regardless of how you feel about it, articles like these are finally confirming what we locals already know. Not to brag on SF women, to be clear, they are without exception highly educated, sharp, successful, and doing interesting stuff. That is true. No doubt. The problem here is a severe imbalance reduces their competition. Yeah, exactly. In many ways, they're similar to New York male friends who have harems of women. Yeah, that is true also as well. So this guy, actually, I agree with a lot of his sentiments. He actually added his own anecdotal observations, and he did a test on different dating apps basically. So I did the exact same thing he did. I did different dating tests in different cities using Tinder, Bumble, Coffee Meets Bagel, Hinge, and I saw a drastic difference. Even more of a difference for me as a minority was when I shifted the dating apps to outside of the States. I think I told you guys this story in a different video, but I was in Brazil for a wedding. And in Brazil, there was a city that had the reverse ratios. And I saw guys who had very low value living in with their mom, dating like girls who looked like Victoria's Secret models. So I think the Bay Area is like the opposite of that. You have girls who are, because of the supply and demand, the average girls who are dating guys with actually quite a lot of sexual marketplace value. This guy's got an interesting take. What's the takeaway? It's easy to despair, but it beats you down. But in these difficult places, you're being disciplined. Yeah, that's true. So my friends used to joke with me when I got to LA. He's like, oh, you're in the Bay Area. It's like you were learning dating skills in the Bay. So it's like you were training with weights on. Okay. Which was true, because once I got to LA, like some guys say they have trouble in LA, and I'm just like, you're kidding. This is like so easy. But for me, I think the timing was I spent so much time in the Bay Area. And when I moved out of there, it was like I had all these skills that I acquired from so many rejections and the supply and demand imbalance that my skills were sharper. My margin of error was lower when I was where I actually started pretty easily to get a lot of results once I moved away from the high pressure of this ratio imbalance. I was in the Bay because I wanted to be in tech, and eventually I landed a job at a big tech company that actually did a lot for me for my career. And I just learned so much in the Bay. I think in my early 20s, I definitely wasn't a great dater. And so given that situation, I just went out there and tried to learn. I met so many cool people up in San Francisco from like around 2006 to 2011. And during that time, I was just so grateful for my time here. But I would say that every time I went out of the Bay Area, every time I came back, it felt like a completely different experience. And there were moments in time when I was in the Bay where I felt like kind of lost, especially when I was living in Sunnyvale, because the ratio there was just so off. I remember going around trying just to find cute girls I can talk to. And it would take me like an hour to 2 hours to find like one cute girl that was in my age range and I could talk to. We had to drive up to the city. We drove up to Sausalito. We drove like 2 hours away to different places just to like find a better location. And it was quite hard sometimes. It was a little disheartening too. And then I remember sometimes I was in the Bay and I would have like, I would be in New York or traveling for work or to meet my friends. And I would come back and then I would get rejected by this girl who in another city, she might have not had that many options, but here she was rejecting me. And it felt like I took it kind of personally, you know? So I think over time, when you're in a tough ratio, it can play tricks on your mind. And so what do you do about it? Obviously, if you're here for a long time, try to take the positives out of the city. If you're here for work, try to learn as much as you can. There's so many smart entrepreneurs in the Bay Area, so much tech innovation. That being said, if you're willing to make the drive to the city, if you want to create a situation where you move to the city, your dating life will be better. Ultimately for me though, when it became crystal clear, okay, I've established my career. Now I'm starting to make plans to move a year or 2 years from now, because I knew that I was getting into my mid to late 20s. I was starting to get into my late 20s, and I knew that like if I wanted to enjoy my youth, I needed to have a more abundant dating life. And so I started making plans, and I think around 27, 28 was when I made the move. And right away when I made the move, I felt a complete difference. It was like, again, I was training with weights on, and the weights had been taken off, and now I was able to kind of the skills I had were much more effective outside of the Bay. So that was my experience. And I think also just like knowing that this is the case, I think sometimes when you don't look at the data, you feel like everything's against you. Like, why are women that are average rejecting me as a guy? And I honestly felt that during the time. And then when I see the data, I'm like, oh, okay, it's not the girl's fault. If I was a guy and there was like a 2-to-1, 3-to-1 girl to guy ratio, I would probably feel entitled after a certain time as well. So it's not necessarily the women's fault. And I knew that I was feeling angry and kind of felt trapped in a way. But once I saw the data, I started not having so much resentment towards the women. I would just like, this is the situation that's in the Bay. You can't change these environmental factors. You can't stop the sun from rising. You can't stop the moon from shining at night. So these environmental factors are kind of beyond your control. So being mad at that is like being mad at the sky for being blue. So what I did instead was, okay, what can I do about this? What do I want my life to look like? And I charted a plan to get there. If you're here for a career, if you have to stay here for a few years, just accept the fact that this is the case and work with, try to focus on the things that make sense for you. You know, to me, the Bay Area didn't stop me from learning social skills, because I was still going out there and I was still getting rejected. But in a way, I was learning a bit more because it was harder. So I was getting, the girls have more options. So my margin of error in terms of my delivery of my lines and the way I conversed and the way I dressed, it was actually had to be higher. So it actually forced me to be better. Okay. If you're in your 30s, like if you're looking for the one, right, then you have to ask yourself, like, what is the ROI on my time? Like, assuming you know like the game, you know social skills, then it's like, what is the ROI for my time? And I can tell you that if you're just looking for that, then it's like, if you have an established career and you're a guy in your 30s, it's like, do I want to spend time here? Every hour I put in here, I will get maybe like, let's say 2x ROI, right? 2x, x being like your return on your romantic life. But if you put an hour in New York, right, it would be like 4x. So in Brazil, it would be like 10x. So you really, once you're established, you have to start asking yourself, okay, what is the ROI on my dating life? And where do I want to be? What type of effort do I want to put in? And that's a question that only you can answer. I hope this was useful. If you want to improve your dating skills, there are resources in my description. First Date Formula covers the conversational skills of getting attractive first dates, how to actually establish value and create an authentic storyline for you that's attractive in dating. Seduce with Style talks about how to improve your look so you save a lot of the work in the beginning because you get that instant attraction. So check out those courses. Link is in the description, and I hope you enjoyed this video.